did you get discovered? Do you remember how you first got into acting? Did you audition?
I can't recall.
You can't recall.
Over the years, Hollywood has been one industry that hasn't succeeded in shielding some of the dark sides of its key figures, often revealing the shocking sides of some revered figures, which no one might have expected. Sometimes, it might just be cases of some of these icons being carried away by the euphoria of fame, but other times, just as you will find in this list, it's something much deeper than anyone would imagine. In Hollywood, there have been some key figures who have had quite an unusual relationship with alcohol, which ultimately resulted in their deaths. Today we have made a list of the top 10 Hollywood actors who had their lives practically destroyed by alcohol. You will marvel at some of the names on this list. Number 10. Richard Burton. Richard Burton was a Welsh actor known for brooding performances squarely based on his powerfully timbered voice in such films as Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, released in 1966, and Cleopatra in 1963. He was also one of Hollywood's most famous husbands, having married actress Elizabeth Taylor twice in his lifetime. This torrid, headline-making, and stormy love affair kept Burton and Taylor under the scope of the public eye and the press, which eventually made them a historical icon among Hollywood couples. Yet, Burton's career suffered under the hitches, brought about by his lifelong war with alcohol. He started drinking early in his life, and soon enough, alcohol became his shadow that never left his side and took its toll on his health and personal relations. Successively over the years, Burton was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver and kidney damage due to his chronic intoxication of alcohol. As a result, he was repeatedly warned by doctors, and he also found himself repeatedly hospitalized but found quitting very hard. Through it all, Burton never gave up his love for the craft. Continuing to act, he garnered 7 Academy Award nominations in his lifetime, though he never ended up winning one, and remained a resilient and doggedly determined figure, never to be completely consumed by his struggles. In 1984, Burton was to appear in 1984, which was to be one of his last films. By this time, years of drinking had taken a serious toll on his health. On August 5, 1984, Burton died from a cerebral hemorrhage at age 58 in Switzerland. With his death went such a brilliant yet tragic career. Despite his struggles, Burton left behind a legacy as one of the finest actors of his generation. Number 9. Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole is a British-Irish legendary actor who is known first for his role in the film adaptation of Lawrence of Arabia back in 1962, catapulting him into international stardom. With such brilliance in acting came a notorious reputation, one for heavy drinking. His wild behavior when drunk was documented at times, which led to several public outbursts and other incidents regarding his state of unawareness about himself. One famous incident involved O'Toole, having drunk all night, waking up in a stranger's house with absolutely no memory of how he got there. Another often quoted story has it that he once set his own house on fire after a night of drinking. He became such a serious alcoholic that his performances were occasionally affected, though his raw talent was frequently enough to see him through. Doctors diagnosed him with pancreatitis in the 1970s and advised O'Toole to give up alcohol. His doctors at the time told him that he wouldn't live long if he kept drinking. Serious about the advice, O'Toole gave up drinking, and in all probability gave himself a longer lease on life, although years of alcohol abuse had already taken its toll on his health. Though O'Toole gave up alcohol, the years of bad living eventually caught up with him. His drinking caused him to fight several related health ailments, including stomach problems. Peter O'Toole died on the 14th of December 2013 after an extended illness aged 81. Though his health was ravaged by alcohol, O'Toole left behind an extraordinary legacy, remembered as one of the finest actors of his generation, whose performances continue to inspire actors and audiences alike. Number 8. Oliver Reed. In his lifetime, Oliver Reed was a name to be reckoned with in Hollywood for his acting skills and achievements in the industry. However, he is a hugely talented British actor whose name has been synonymous with notorious drinking since the latter stages of his life. Born in 1938, Reed rose to become a household name in the 1960s and 70s with standout roles in films like Oliver, in 1968, in which he played the villainous Bill Sikes, and in the popular historical drama The Devils in 1971. He also reached stardom through his representation of Athos in The Three Musketeers, which was first released in 1973, and its sequel. He also featured in the rock opera Tommy in 1975. With his rugged charisma and brooding performances, Reed was a very in-demand leading man. However, his career was always overshadowed by the antics he showed off-screen. Notorious for being an excessive drinker, Reed would more often than not show up drunk on sets or conduct himself wildly, which affected his professionalism. Bar brawls and outrageous public appearances were often linked to him, diminishing his reputation within the film industry and making opportunities for him very limited. The climax of Reed's drinking problem came on set while filming Gladiator in Malta in the year 2000. Reed collapsed and died of a heart attack at the age of 61 after an all-night binge in which he reportedly consumed 8 pints of beer, a dozen shots of rum, and several bottles of whiskey. Despite the turmoil in his personal life, Reed has left behind a lasting legacy in acting, with the command, on-screen performance, and satisfaction that only he could offer. His final performance was released posthumously in Gladiator, and it immortalized him in such a role which brought several awards to the film. Number 7. Jan Michael Vincent. Jan Michael Vincent was an overnight favorite American actor of the 1970s and the 80s, best remembered for the starring role of Stringfellow Hawk in the TV hit series Airwolf between 1984 and 1986. At the peak of his career, Vincent had become one of the highest-paid television actors, receiving up to $200,000 per episode. However, this hugely promising career of his was ruined by his long struggle with alcohol and drug addiction. Vincent's substance abuse was gradual, beginning early in his career and only gradually growing worse and worse. Erratic behavior, powered by binges of both alcohol and drugs, caused a plethora of problems on set, including delays and conflicts with producers and co-stars. Due to the addiction, his performance suffered with regard to his job, and by the time Airwolf ended, his career was in freefall. In 1996, a really bad car accident left a permanent mark on one of Vincent's legs. A few years later, due to complications in the peripheral artery, they amputated his right leg below the knee. Remembering all this, it's really sad that his life should turn out this way, but he still wasn't one to call it quits. Outside of physical damage, his addiction brought his career to shambles, as he was involved with numerous arrests and other drug-related offenses. By the time of his death in 2019 at age 73, Jan Michael Vincent had been largely forgotten by Hollywood, a tragic figure whose immense talent was consumed by addiction. Number 6. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn was one of these actors who cashed in on Hollywood's golden era, finding himself cast in movies like Captain Blood in 1935 and The Adventures of Robin Hood in 1938. Handsome and charismatic on screen, Flynn became one of the largest stars of the 1930s and 1940s. Off-camera, though, Flynn lived a life that was as dramatic as any on-screen performance, involving heavy drinking, womanizing, and wild behavior. Soon, his drinking became legendary and shortly afterward was affecting his career and health. Many of his affairs and incidents involving the police gave him the tag of being the ultimate bad boy of Hollywood. His drinking habit worsened over time, and with it, his career in acting kept getting worse, hence the delays in shooting and erratic behavior on screen. The various health conditions caused by his alcoholism began to catch up with him in the 1950s, when he was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, among other ailments. However, he refused to stop drinking. Flynn did nothing in the face of doctors' warnings of possible severe health consequences, continuing to drink heavily and live recklessly. By his 40s, suffering from extreme illness, Flynn now looked much older than his years. Flynn died of a heart attack in Vancouver on October 14, 1959, when he was 50 years old. The post-mortem showed that alcohol had consumed his intestines, and he was suffering from advanced cirrhosis among other complications that caused his death. Though he died quite early in life, Flynn still is an icon in Hollywood for his adventurous roles and larger-than-life personality. It's just quite sad that we had to lose him that early at the peak of his career. Number 5. William Claude Dukenfield. W.C. Fields, born William Claude Dukenfield, was an American comedian and actor born with his razor-sharp wit and passion for acting, which translated to a really successful career on television. He began in vaudeville, later working in silent films and talkies, and created iconic film roles in the movies like The Bank Dick in 1940 and My Little Chickadee also in the same year. He was infamous for his excessive drinking, which turned into part of his persona both on and off the screen. Everybody knew that Fields liked alcohol. He worked his drinking into much of his comedy, with many of his screen characters quite heavy drinkers. Actually, he was much more of a problem, known to have begun to drink even at dawn. The chronic alcoholism seriously affected his health and work. Quite often, he came to filming sets in drunken states and disturbed the production process. At one point, he was drinking so much that he had to shoot his scenes while seated because he could not even stand. By the 1940s, Fields' heavy drinking, which caused liver and kidney damage, had finally taken a toll on his health. Though doctors warned him to stop, Fields jested, "I don't drink water, fish feet in it." He did not follow the warnings of the doctors and continued drinking right into the last years of his life. W.C. Fields died on December 25, 1946, age 66, due to hemorrhaging in the lining of his stomach brought on by several years of continuous drinking. He remained an eternal figure in comedy, living on through his sharp wit, irreverence, and timeless contributions he had made to American entertainment, even though his alcoholism had cut his life short. Number 4. Humphrey Bogart. Arguably, Humphrey Bogart was one of Hollywood's most iconic leading men, famous for his tough guy personas in such classics as Casablanca in 1942 and The Maltese Falcon in 1941. He would go on to be one of the major stars of noir and romantic dramas through the 1940s and 1950s because of his commendable acting skills. However, it wasn't as easy for Bogart both on and off screen, as his life was filled with excessive drinking that became part of his story. The love for alcohol often made Bogart misbehave. He was known to have one of the most famous drunken capers at a restaurant where, in a state of drunkenness, he heckled other patrons and finally broke glasses. Another time, he went drunk to a press conference and managed to slur and raise hell. It brought tension on the film sets, arguments, and disruptions, though his talent always seemed to outweigh his off-screen troubles. It was during the 1950s that everything started to go really wrong for Bogart, with his health beginning to deteriorate. He had esophageal cancer as a result of years of excessive drinking and heavy smoking. Even at that time, Bogart would not quit drinking, and his condition continued to grow worse. His wife, the actress Lauren Bacall, tried very hard to get him to cut down on alcohol, but he was too attached to his routine. At the age of 57 on January 14, 1957, Bogart died due to the illness. His lifelong addiction to alcohol and the resulting disease might have burned him out, but the legend he has left as one of the all-time best to ever work in Hollywood will continue to live through timeless performances and a tough, complicated persona. Number 3. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton was that 1950s Hollywood actress whose life became a tragedy due to alcoholism and a dissolute lifestyle. Once seen as a major star, following appearances in films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye in 1950, where she starred along with James Cagney, her career had nosedived when she became mired in scandal. Overindulgence in drink led Payton into various scrapes with the law, including public intoxication, prostitution, and even assault. Her behavior, driven by alcohol, hit headlines, displacing her early Hollywood success to the background. It also deprived her of the custody of her son, John Lee Payton. The courts ruled that she was unfit to look after him, given the alcoholic binges and promiscuous affairs that made her life too unsettled and unpredictable to have a child around. Her personal life became infamous because of her numerous affairs, most particularly the highly publicized love triangle with actor Francho Tone and Tom Neal, which ended in a violent brawl. This and her increasing alcohol dependency got her blacklisted from Hollywood studios, effectively ending her acting career. During the last years of her life, Peyton was homeless, deeply addicted, and living in poverty. On May 8, 1967, the 39-year-old was found dead in her parents' house in San Diego as a result of heart and liver failure brought on by years of heavy alcohol consumption. Barbara Payton's life surely has much to say about how fame, addiction, and truly louche living can take one down a path of utter destruction. Number 2. Bernard Lee. Bernard Lee was a great British actor who played the iconic Bond character M in the Bond film series, which appeared in 11 Bond films from Dr. No in 1962 to Moonraker in 1979. With his commanding voice and presence, Lee morphed into an iconic figure within the franchise for the character of a stern but fatherly head of MI6. However, with all professional success, his personal life was blighted by a succession of tragedies that ultimately brought him down. But the most tragic of all was when, in 1972, his wife Gladys Meridew died in a house fire. The tragedy sincerely affected Lee, plunging him into a whirlpool of grief and depression. In pain, he tried to seek consolation from alcohol, which quickly took over his life. As his drinking problem worsened, more time went by, and due to it, his health and career both began to suffer. On-screen problems because of his addiction to alcohol resulted in performances that had always been so lively, growing increasingly labored as a result of his addiction. Yet he didn't stop acting, while the rest of his life remained in ruins. In the late 1970s, Lee was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Probably the years of heavy drinking had by then already ruined his health. On January 16, 1981, Bernard Lee died at the age of 73 due to stomach cancer. He left behind him a legacy as one of Britain's finest character actors. While personal tragedy dogged his life, his performance as M in the James Bond series has placed him indelibly into cinema history in the minds and hearts of film lovers everywhere. Number 1. John Barrymore. John Barrymore was born in 1882 in Philadelphia to one of America's great families of actors, the Barrymores. Indeed, John's profile and image earned him the nickname the Great Profile. Barrymore gained celebrity status as one of the most influential leading men on both stage and screen in Hollywood, starring in classics such as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1920 and Grand Hotel in 1932. His strong performances, particularly in Shakespearean roles in plays such as Hamlet, gained him a great deal of respect among other actors of his time. Yet, parallel to that brilliant success, the life of Barrymore was blighted by a long and serious battle he had to fight with alcohol. Famous for his drunkenness, he often overindulged to such an extent that it began to take personal and professional blows in his life. The alcoholism of Barrymore caused some scenes on set, as the quality of performances deteriorated, and it made him unreliable because he often could not remember the lines, which meant that a brilliant career started to suffer. By the end of the 1930s, Barrymore's health was vastly deteriorated because of excessive drinking. His handsome, charming face became a bloated old face, well beyond his age. Despite all attempts by his friends and family, Barrymore was beyond help. In 1942, Barrymore died at the age of 60 as a result of complications from cirrhosis of the liver and kidney failure. This was indeed a tragic end for one of Hollywood's brightest stars, whose gigantic talent was overcome in his struggle with alcohol. Nevertheless, in spite of all that, John Barrymore is a cult figure in the history of both theater and film, remembered by every new generation for his appeal and the great influence he managed to make in acting. The list goes on and on, as there are some other actors whose careers have been ravaged by alcohol addiction that didn't make it to this list. You can mention some of them in the comments and we will see you in the next video.